just want to thank everyone for attending. Thank Alison for being here for this conversation tonight. As you'll see throughout the conversation, Alison is a really important part of this project. She has an upcoming exhibition, which is a companion piece to this overall project of Common Ground. And so she is also one of our storytellers. You'll be seeing an example of her storytelling this evening as well. She utilized our video platform to share a story with us. And so in addition, if you have any questions for Alison about her exhibition or her participation, goes to Jocelyn in the chat feature. So before I formally start my presentation and share my screen, I just want to give you a little bit of background on sort of where this project generated from. So my background, although I am now a museum curator, the Curator of Social History at the Whaling Museum, for most of my career, I was doing anthropology. I was teaching anthropology and doing field work in anthropology. And one of the most important things when you're an anthropologist doing field work is you can't watch things on film or be. Our job is to live within the communities you work with, to work alongside them, to spend days with them as if you were one of them, to have daily conversations and engage in work where you learn about how people see the world, their concerns, their troubles, the things that they think are important. And so from, I think, the first day I came onto the museum, I started thinking, how wonderful would it be to do that kind of work, but to capture, what it means to be a resident of Greater New Bedford and the lived experience of Greater New Bedford residents. And so we wanted to engage as an institution in this project so that we could do outreach and work with the community and have the community feel like they are represented within the walls of the museum. So I just very quickly want to read to you, because although much has changed since the pandemic started, I went back earlier today and looked at the original prospectus, and I think nothing about that has changed. So I wrote, this exhibition will explore the lived experiences and memories of many generations of Greater New Bedford residents of various identities. Increasingly, as museums move toward inclusive histories and framing historic preservation as social justice, exhibits are becoming areas in which communities see themselves represented and can explore complex and sometimes difficult histories. A museum can become an institution that increases access and inclusion and forms alliances with groups who have historically been left out of museum narratives. And so the way that we envisioned doing this is to collect oral histories, photographs, and objects that capture the living memories of residents of Greater New Bedford so that we can present an exhibition that creates a sense of belonging and increases community interest and participation within the museum. And we also want to create an exhibit that through their own participation moves often marginalized community members from invisibility to engagement and empowerment, with the New Bedford Whaling Museum serving as a platform for this engagement and empowerment. And so that's really what's at the heart, to tell the story of the community in the community's voice and using the community's words rather than us doing it for them. And so to give you some more details on that, I'm going to switch to sharing my screen with you. And so we called this project Common Ground, a community mosaic, because we are telling what might seem like very different stories from very different perspectives. And our goal is to put those stories together to paint a singular picture of life in Greater New Bedford, sort of like a mosaic with the different colored tiles and the different pattern tiles come together and you see one image in that. And so again, we have Alison here. We're very lucky to have Alison here tonight. I'm going to play her story in a moment. She used our web platform, which I'll explain a little later. But I do want to mention before showing her video, the original plan was that I was going to walk the city and go into businesses and talk to people sitting on benches and really have this very personal human interaction to share the idea for this project and to get community participation. And then COVID-19 happened and we were all locked inside. And it's still not safe to fulfill my original plan of going out into community meetings and these group workshops. And so we had to re-envision a new way to bring community members together to share their stories. And one thing we came up with was the creation of a web platform where community members who have stories to share can go on and film a 10-minute video with their story. And so hopefully, if this link works okay, it'll bring us right to Alison's story.
Hello everyone, my name is Alison Wells. I am an artist and an art educator, and I have been living in New Bedford for 16 years. I am currently the owner of Alison Wells Fine Arts Studio and Gallery on 106 Williams Street in downtown New Bedford. I'm in my gallery right now. I tell people it's my happy place. It really is my happy place. And I've come a long way in 16 years of being here. And I must say, I haven't done it on my own. I've got the help of the amazing community in New Bedford, the amazing arts community, and my family. My family back home have really supported me as well. And so I came here specifically to do my master's UMass Dartmouth. And I did my degree in 3 years. It was a 3-year program. I said I was going to do it in 2 because you could do it in 2 if you wished. I said 2 years and I'm out of here. I tell the story all the time. And of course, I ended up doing it in 3. I love that I did it in 3. And then I decided, things were happening in the city, like a renaissance in the arts. And, people didn't want to leave. In the past, a lot of students came, they got their degree and they left. And that was my plan. And then I started back. They were renting affordable studios. And there was so much going on in the city that I wanted to be a part of that. And at that time, I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago. So I had an opportunity to stay there for longer with OPT and optional practical training. And I decided, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do an optional practical training for a year, see what happens, and just continue this ride because, a lot of it was just happening in the city. And I had to get a job. So I was looking for different jobs. And in the community, I was offered 2 jobs. I was offered 2 part-time jobs. The first one was with Artworks. So my heart is there. It was one of my first jobs. Artworks, I was teaching kids in the summertime and after school program. And believe it or not, I'm still teaching after school programs with them. I was also teaching with the New Bedford Historical Society, and that was an amazing opportunity because I learned so there was a program called Hidden Histories, and there was a historian that taught the kids all about the Underground Railroad and Frederick Douglass. And then I came after that, and I would do art projects related to it. So in doing that, of course, I'm learning so much about the Underground Railroad through the historian and through this program. So these 2 things really did assist me in creating roots after I graduated. So the next thing was like my studio. Now, if you know, the art studios at UMass for the grad program and seniors are at Star Building, and the Star Building is beautiful. Our painting studios are on the 4th floor. You could see the sea. It was big, beautiful, and of course when you graduate you have to leave your studio behind. So that was a bit depressing. Take all my stuff, pack it into my little apartment. I turned my bedroom into my studio and I lived in my living room. That wasn't working because I was not motivated to work. And then one day I'm the youngest daughter of 5 girls, and she's my eldest sister. And she always supported me. Hell, I mean, she was always my #1 fan. She and my parents, my other sisters, but my parents, definitely my mother and my sister, they were like my cheerleaders, right? I used to call them my managers. So she came to visit me one day. We're having a great time, and I take her to the Cummings building, which actually is this building I'm in, but upstairs has studios for artists. And my friend had a studio there, so we went to visit her, and we looked around the other studios, and the ones that were available were open. And there was the smallest one, but it just had a great energy. It was long, you could see onto Purchase Street, and I was just in love with this studio, but I couldn't afford it. And so my sister's like, okay, you need the studio. I'm like, yeah, but I can't afford it. She's like, I'm gonna pay for it for 6 months, and then you're on your own. You have to, you have to do that after. And so I'm like, huh? Okay, let's do it. And I remember telling my mom, and she was just like, what's gonna happen after the 6 months? Are you gonna be able to pay for it? I was like, yes, I'm gonna do it. But it's something when you have like the heat, the fire under you to make things happen, you make it happen, believe it or not. But the funny thing is, so she gave me my studio, and it really catapulted my career, because now, collectors could come to my studio to see my work. I could teach art from my little studio. I would open it out on art nights, art history and architecture nights, every second Thursday. So it now gave me this energy where I could now give back. And so it was just interesting because, in life, when you keep thinking about the next step, where we're going now, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? You tend to forget. Like, people who say, I've done that, like vision boards, like things you want, you write it down. And then when you lose things that you got and you didn't realize. So it's so important to be grateful for the little things. And the reason I say that is because last year, I remember cleaning out a bookcase, and I already have the gallery here. I clean out a bookcase, and I find this envelope with a letter. It's from my sister, the same sister. And it was a letter that enclosed a check. And she said, Alice, that's what she calls me. Alice, this is a check for 6 months of your studio rent. Fly, eagle, fly. And she calls me an eagle. She's like, so she gave me that check, and I forgot. So now here I am in my gallery, not my studio. So that was my first studio. Actually, 3 years after that, I moved to another studio in the same building upstairs, but it was a little bigger. I paid for it myself. And then 3 years after that, I opened the gallery down here, much bigger. And I'm thinking about, I'm just moving, and I didn't take a minute. And when I read that last year, I cried, because I'm like, oh my God, look at where I came. I had to call her. I mean, I thanked her a million times. But these are the stories to keep reminding you where you came from. Keep reminding you the people who have been in your court supporting you. My sister's always been there. My family has always been there. And then I'm thinking of all other, the other steps that I took forward after having that studio, where the community stepped up and supported me. Times when I raised money for different things, and they were there. They were there always, supporting me, buying my work, advertising for me, wanting to see me go forward, rooting forward for me in every step of the way. I got from OPT, I went on to getting an artist visa, which I think is just, it's even better than a work visa, because for an artist, you have an artist visa. Like, it's a romantic thing. But the community came out again. I remember having a studio sale, raising money for that. So I could raise money so that I can apply for that, etc., all the legal forms and stuff. And there again, all the community came out supporting me. Professors, collectors, my past collectors, my friends who went to school with me at UMass. I mean, friends, artists who don't have much money, but they were still there, buying little pieces of work, supporting me, being there, just support. And that's what it's all about. The art community has always been rallying around each other, and they rallied around me. Even though I was an outsider, I was once an outsider. I don't feel that again. because I felt like I was brought in. And that's how it's been going. And since I've had the gallery, I've felt like that. So, you know, a lot of people ask me, and I tell them this all the time, New Bedford has been good to me. It is my home away from home, my second home. It fills me with a lot of love and light, and just to see how people band together and support each other. And I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be in my happy little place in my gallery, and we'll see what happens next, where we go, you know. Never make heavy plans. You make a plan and you keep going, and you trust that God and your universe will guide you to the right place. I didn't know I was going to open a gallery 16 years ago. Let's see what happens in the next 16. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alison, for being our first. Alison actually recorded our first web platform video for this project. And as I always tell people after I show that video, please do not be intimidated by it. Alison is a wonderful storyteller. She's very polished and vibrant, and I mean, it was absolutely professionally done. Don't feel like you have to have such beautiful scenery in the background and tell the same kind of story. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, sort of the types of stories we're looking for. But I just wanted to provide you with a really good example of storytelling and the web platform that I will share with you later. So I think Alison's video is a nice segue into the fact that for this overall project, which will not end, the final exhibition will not be until 2022, because of course to collect all of these stories, we need to invest time and we need to do quite a bit of outreach. Many exhibitions leading up to the project, and Alison's is the first. We wanted Greater New Bedford residents who had stories to tell about the area, and that tell those stories not only through their words, but through the art that they produce. And so we have Alison's upcoming exhibition, which is in, what is it, exactly 2 weeks. It's opening in the neighborhood. We have Elizabeth James Perry's exhibition, which is opening shortly thereafter on September 3rd, Ripples Through a Wampanoag Lens. And then in 2022, we have Henry Hornstein, who is a fabulous photographer, sharing some of his pieces with us. So I would just ask, again, since the point of this is to not tell these stories through our words, but through the words of the community, I would just invite Alison to share about her upcoming exhibition and how it fits into this overall project, discussing Greater New Bedford.
Okay, you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So hello everyone, I'm Alison Wells, and it's been quite a ride, 16 years of being here. And so I have a lot to pull from, just like the story. You know, I have a lot of stories in different circumstances since I've moved here. Ideas and experiences have filtered in and are very important parts of my work. I've always, since back in 2012, I did a series, an 02740 collages of New Bedford. So, and since then I've constantly been doing, you know, ideas of New Bedford, because it is the city I live in and I can't ignore it. It comes up in my work a lot of the time. So for this exhibition, it's mixed media work. It's collage, mixed media collage and painting. I use textures in it. So it's very tactile, but also it talks a lot about, I call it in the neighborhood, and it's all about New Bedford, not any specific neighborhood. When you look at the pieces, you might be able to point out certain areas, certain streets, but also, so it's literal, but it's also imaginative. It's also almost like ethereal. So all of these things go on in my mind when I'm working on one specific piece. And architecture for me is a very important part in the New Bedford landscape, as well as the culture. But you would see the architecture coming up over and over again. What actually happened is I had ideas of what I wanted to show for the show, but the way I work on many pieces at once, and I allow the work to take me further, to tell me where I'm going, or even one piece, the piece tells me what other step to take. And I know that sounds crazy, like when I talk to my students, I'm a crazy person being like, let the painting talk to you, but it's so true. And not only that, I allowed the series to talk to me. So I had ideas of what I wanted to show. I had a thick sketchbook of sketches and studies, but then I allowed, as I got involved in the work, I allowed the work to take its course and not try to direct it on what way to go. And I'm really pleased of where it's coming, because it's coming from the heart, and it's coming from 16 years of just different experiences, emotions with the community, with, art community, just traveling. It also is an interaction of cultures too, because I am Trinidadian, and my Caribbean culture has unconsciously, melded into the work as well. I can't get away from that. So it is interesting to see what's happening there in terms of color, in terms of, progress of how I see things. I might see it in a different way that you do. So that's just a little bit about it together. So I'm interested in, and I'm very excited for you all to see the work and have your own opinions of what you get from it.
It's a fabulous collection of pieces. I'm so excited to open the show, as I'm sure you are too. And so Alison gave you a little bit of her story. She has lots of stories, and I hope to get some more out of her by the end of this project. The second exhibition, Elizabeth James Perry's, is about so many things, like Alison's. You think you sit down to tell a singular story, and there are all these threads. Elizabeth's is about the persistence of memory and culture and the environment and Native American women. And Henry, he submitted a written story about his father, in his adolescence. And so I think these companion exhibitions are not only important for highlighting local arts and local artists, but of course, artists are storytellers through various media. And so we're really excited to have these companion exhibitions be part of the overall project. And so now we get to the community stories part of it. And this is why we're reaching out to you this evening and going a little in depth with the explanation on common ground. And so we are really looking for any story, every story. I've had a lot of people contact me to either ask, if I think their story will suit the project. It's a question. Every story will fit this project. We are trying to capture every age, every identity, just really, as many stories as we can get about people's lived experience in Greater New Bedford. And I really, rather than doing interviews, I really just want to leave it open-ended and say, tell me your story. But of course, that makes people very nervous because, well, what's my story? So we do have some prompts that we sent out on a flyer. Anything from neighborhood stories to things you have that are connected to your identity. If you're a community elder, what are the changes you've seen in Greater New Bedford over time? Hardship and struggle. And so we're not looking for some of the stories that we've received thus far are pretty heartbreaking, but they're all part of the picture, and I don't want to exclude those stories. A day in the life, so just a typical day or a day that something happened. I've gotten plenty of those stories as well. Places and spaces, if there are landmarks or particular areas that you have stories about. Family histories. Somehow family history always becomes part of the story, regardless of the story, the part of the story that people are focusing on. Stories about my city, So if you have a story about what makes the Greater New Bedford area unique, what makes it yours, right? What connects you to it, and then creativity in the arts. And we just got a really good example of story. And so these are the stories we're looking for, but you're not limited to these topics. I just sort of wanted to put something out there so people don't feel stuck thinking about what types of stories they should tell. There are a couple of different ways, 3 different ways that you can get stories to us. So I think as of now, the majority of stories that we've received have been written. We have an email address where stories can be emailed, and you're not limited to one, by the way. Send me as many stories as you'd like. You can also upload to the web platform that we saw on, that Alison used to record her story. And that can be reached on our website at commongroundmosaic.org. It will bring you to the Whaling Museum's page for the Common Ground project. Gives you some explanation of the project. And then at the very bottom, there is an opportunity to share your story on the video platform. I know you would never know it from all these Zoom conversations I've been doing, but I really don't enjoy being on camera and looking into a camera or a laptop. So if it makes you more comfortable, someone in the household can sit down with you and you can tell them your story. Very easy platform to use. You can get to it on your phone or your laptop. You would just click here on share your story via video here. And it reminds you, again, that these stories will be made public, which is why some people who've submitted have chosen to remain anonymous, and we absolutely respect that. But these will be used, they will be archived, absolutely, but they might be used in the final exhibition in 2022. They might be used for promotional purposes, right? So Alison's video is probably one that we will use over and over again. Yours may be as well. And to do a publication. And so any video photographs that you give us might be used in that way as well, or any story that you give us might be used in that way as well. And so if you click on continue, it just asks you a few simple questions. So even if you choose to remain anonymous, we will respect that, but we do need your name for our records. So name and your email address and your phone number, and then you click next step. Gives you some pointers. So those same story topics we looked at in one of the slides, your experience during COVID-19, which wasn't on the flyer because we wrote those up before COVID-19 happened, but those would be great stories to have for archiving. My story, it brings you to another page, and you can click on record video, and if you're happy with it, you click on finish. It gets uploaded to the cloud, and then we review it and make sure it's okay. We will contact you if it needs to be edited at all, but that's about it. And so it's a really easy process. I'm sure Alison can speak to that. It wasn't difficult to record, was it? Pretty easy. And so that's another way you can share your story via video. It allows you to shoot a 10-minute video, and if you want to record a longer video than that, either do it in 2 segments or 3 segments so that you have more time, or you can always contact me and we can do a Zoom session like this where I record it and I don't say a word. I just sort of sit back and listen to your story, and then it's recorded. And I've done that for some storytellers to record stories up to 30 minutes long. The third way, and believe it or not, I've gotten quite a few of these already. You can mail it. You can send a story through snail mail. So I've gotten, as I said, quite a few stories mailed to me at the Whaling Museum at 18 Johnny Cake Hill. And so feel free to use that as well. If you can come up with any of your story with me, that is fine too. This is a living, breathing project, and it's evolving as we go. And so feel free to contact me about other ways to share your story. Again, we've gotten many written stories. The vast majority of the stories we've received so far have been written, And so I just wanted to give you some quotes from stories so you could see the various types of stories, the sentiments that are expressed in some of these stories. So the first quote, "Our community offered a way of life which included the means to survive in all aspects of culture." Another, "All of us as immigrants will remain children of two cultures, but we have the ability to gather the sum of our experiences to create a city that believes in the goodness of people." A third, "When he was an adolescent and living on Arnold Street, Reggie and some friends from the neighborhood decided to find an outlet to express their individual talents and put together a show for the neighborhood. They called themselves the Park Street Gang, and the group put on several shows with music, singing, dancing, and skits." And then here's one of those everyday stories, right? Typical here yesterday. Who hasn't heard that? Well, I was there yesterday and it was great. The thing is, I was the only person on the beach. Sweet. That's how it ought to be. That's how it was. Now look it, to be clear, I didn't catch a lot of fish yesterday. Hooked 5 and landed 2, but they were nice, strong, big-shouldered, picture-perfect stripers, honestly sought and fairly landed. So again, as I was saying earlier, I have no limits or boundaries in my mind as to what kinds of stories. I really want whatever stories are important to the storytellers to be shared with us.
Akeia, we have a question. If you
Sure.
are interested in hearing stories from people who no longer live in New Bedford but do have one.
Absolutely. And so if you grew up in New Bedford, but now you live in California or now you live overseas, absolutely. So we're really looking for stories that happened within people's lifetime. And so if that means, you grew up here and went to elementary school here and you have a story about that, but you're no longer here, I still want that story. We still want that as part of this project. But again, in the vein of the different types of stories we're looking for, one of our museum apprentices also shared a story with us on the video platform. And the thing that I love about this story is it was presented to us as a story about cooking with her mom. And just in the 4 or 5 minutes of the story, you really get so much more out of her story than cooking with her mom.
Okay, now I hit record. So I'm going to talk about me, where I came from and who I am. And I'm also going to talk about food because it's like my favorite thing ever in the world. So I guess I should probably talk about the first thing though. My parents are cool. Really? My mom is Panamanian. So she was born in Panama and lived there until she was like 20. She lived with my dad, who actually was like on tour. He was in the army. And so he met her in Panama and they had like a little romance sort of thing. And when he was stationed out to other places, they would send letters and stuff. And it was like all cutesy. And then we came back there. And when she was about 1 year old, they both immigrated to the US. Well, my dad immigrated first when he was like a little baby from Portugal, but he lived in the US. He was like basically an American, lived there his whole life, and he still lives here. So now that they live here, when I was 5, they got divorced, but it's not really like a big thing in my mind. And so I really like the fact that I'm Portuguese and Panamanian, because I know like a lot of people here are Portuguese, but I'm still proud of the fact that I am. And I'm really proud of the fact that I'm Panamanian, because not a lot of people are from there. And I really like love the culture, and I get to my family, and I just adore my family from there, even though it's kind of hard because I don't speak that much Spanish. My mom tried to teach me, but one time we were in Target and I almost got run over by a car, and she was like telling me in Spanish to stop, and I just was like, huh, what? And thankfully I did not get run over, but she got like scared straight, and I guess I just started talking English from then on. But something that really helps me connect with my Panamanian side is probably cooking with my mom, because I know that it's not true, but I feel like my sister is kind of the favorite in her eyes, and I'm kind of the favorite in my dad's eyes. But whenever we would cook, me and my mom, it was just like our special time, you know? And we would cook pretty much anything. We cook like American dishes a lot, but when we cooked, Panamanian dishes are my favorite because they're always like so much better and like flavorful, and so much worse for you because they're so like fatty, but they're so good. My favorite dish to make is empanadas, which are basically like meat fritters. You can do like any type of meat, I guess, but she would take ground hamburger, and she put like Goya packets, which you can only get from like certain grocery stores, I guess, because we always have to go to like Price Right near here, the Price Right near the Whaling Museum. I'm not really good with directions, but we would go there when I was a little kid, and it was always kind of a different experience because we'd always go to Shaw's, and that place was very like gentrified for white people, but going to that Price Right was kind of a cool experience. I don't know why I'm focusing so much on the supermarket. I should probably talk about the food, because that's where it is. So my mom, I should probably talk about the Goya packets too. So these little circular discs is where you would put the meat in, and then you'd like fold it up, and some people pinch it with their fingers, but my mom uses a fork, and it makes these cool little divots. But you can't do it with the original circles that they give you prepackaged, because the edges sometimes get freezer burn and they don't seal up correctly. So my mom takes a margarita glass and she cuts the edges, and I would do that when I was a little kid because she wouldn't like trust me near like the oven and the fryer and all that stuff. So I'd just be like neatly cutting all these little circles. And I hate to say it, but when I was a little kid, I used to eat like the scrap dough all the time when it was like uncooked. I don't know why. I love eating like raw dough for some reason. It's not good.
All right.
But I don't do it anymore. I still make empanadas with my mom. Empanadas with my mom. And it always like brings me back to being a kid. And I made it one time with my abuelita in Panama when I was like 15 for my quinceañera. And it's just one of those like smells that like makes you like homesick, but not really, because like Panama isn't my home, I guess, because I wasn't born there. But
it feels like home.
It does feel like home to me.
Yeah.
Like I just felt like so at ease when I was there. When she was there, she was like it was a whole different side of her. Like she was like bubbly and fun, and like it was a really cool experience. So, and I feel like she gets, even if it's just a little bit, she always gets a little bit happier when we're cooking together too, and that's really special, I guess. Okay, I think I'm gonna stop the recording now.
So again, this story that, you know, she may have felt in the beginning wasn't big enough for this project. That is exactly what we're looking for, Alison. You know, we just want people to express their history and identity and what's important to them. And again, at the very end of all of this, after years of collecting these stories, we will pore over them and come up with something, right? And that's that actually brings me to the very scary part of this project. What is it going to be when we're done? So, you know, in my mind, there were going to be certain themes when we were developing this project. And I should say, my sounding board, when I came up with this idea, was Michael Lapides. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us here tonight, but I would go into his office every day and would say, what are you doing? And he was really, really supportive in helping me think out this project. And I apologize, someone's sawing outside right now. You can probably hear that. But some of the themes might be change in the Greater New Bedford area, growing up in Greater New Bedford, immigration stories, long gone businesses, the arts community, working on the waterfront, family stories, neighborhoods. These are the themes that we've come up with thus far based on the stories we have. As an anthropologist, I wasn't supposed to go into my field work or my work with any preconceived notions. I was there to learn and discover, and you come up with the final product when you're done with that process, which takes at least a year, but usually longer. And so we're sort of doing this exhibition in the same way. I have an idea that this exhibition, this project, is going to be about life in Greater New Bedford and the lived experience of people. I know that these stories will be archived. I know that we will have a written archive, a video archive, an audio archive of all of these stories we're collecting. I know that long after the final exhibition goes in, we will continue to collect stories to sort of keep our fingers on the pulse of sort of representing the community, having the community feel welcome within the walls of the museum. But as far as the actual final exhibition, I have no idea. Because if I am asking community members to share stories, and I am promising that their stories are going to be told from their perspective and not from mine as a curator, I can't put the exhibition together until I have the stories. I don't know what the themes of the exhibition will be until I have a collection of stories. And this is where the community comes in. So I can't stress enough, if I get 10,000 stories, it's going to be a lot of reading to do, but I would prefer that to 100 stories, because the more stories I get, and the more people that participate, more people that are asserting various identities, the more beautiful that mosaic will become, right? The more intricate it will become with all the interlocking stories, because again, the stories might seem vastly different on paper, but I think when we get a collection of them together, we're going to see how they weave into one another to create this singular picture of New Bedford. And I went on a lot longer than I planned to, but I will open now to Jocelyn if she has any questions for Alison or myself about the project specifically.
So we do have somebody who's asking that you mentioned the Greater New Bedford area, and what would that area cover?
Well, I'm sort of, cheating is probably a bad word, right? But I guess in my mind, I'm thinking we're the old Dartmouth Historical Society. So the entire surrounding area that would have been part of old Dartmouth is up for grabs. But I think if we're trying to get a sense of the region, you have something to contribute to the story of Greater New Bedford. So again, I mean, I hate to be so vague, but I think anyone in the area that has a story to tell would be welcome to share their story.
I have a personal question, and this might help individuals out there. I am a longtime resident of New Bedford, but I guess I don't know where to start and what a story could be. So do you have any ideas of how somebody could narrow it down? I know you showcased one of the apprentices who had something so simple as, a recipe that they're used to making and their heritage. But for somebody like me who I've had a very typical New Bedford upbringing, but I guess I just don't know where to start or what would qualify as a story. I don't know if I went through, I see myself choppy. So if I have to repeat it, let me know.
I think that's part of the difficulty with this. You ask people to share their stories, and people can share, that it's difficult to narrow it down. But I would say if you're really having a difficult time with that, think of something significant that happened to you. And it may have been last week, it may have been when you were in high school, it may have been when you were in elementary school. But just tell me a story about that. I actually, it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, actually took a walk through Bay Village with someone, and I was trying to get a very particular story from a photograph. And I didn't even get the story about the photograph, because once we got into the neighborhood, she was pointing and saying, this person lived here and that person lived there, and oh, in this patch of grass we used to play this game, and we would go over here and sit on the stoop, and this house was where my babysitter lived. And so there were like 20 different stories in that one encounter. So I think with a lot of people, if you think of something significant or something that sticks out in your memory that you want to write a story about, a lot of things will come from that, and you may not end up sharing the first story you thought of. Your 4 different stories that come from that one memory. So it's really open-ended, but I'm trying to be careful not to tell people what to write about, because I want it to come from them and not from me.
I'm excited for the show. Everything is coming along nicely. I am still painting, because painters, we paint right up to the end. Sometimes galleries and museums would be like upset with us bringing in wet paint, but I promise I won't bring in any paintings with wet paint. But, you know, there's always something. Like, you know, Picasso always said a painting is never finished in the eyes of the artist, but, you know, it can be resolved. But my piece is all resolved. I'm excited to share it with all of you and to see how you respond to it. So thank you for having me here today.
Thank you for participating, and thank you so much for being one of our featured artists in this project. I think your work so speaks to the community and your love for it and how it inspires you. And I know we've had conversations about all of the above, and I think it's going to be a really wonderful first piece to this overall project. And I guess, you know, if I were to say anything, it's just please, please, please share your stories with us. And if you have any questions or want any guidance about how to begin, the original intent was we were going to get people into rooms and do workshops and have events and programming. And COVID-19 really got in the way of that. And I really, you know, I had a lot of anxiety over that. How am I going to do this project? And I eventually realized there are so many ways, there have been so many ways throughout history that people have gotten storytelling done. And so a little bit of inconvenience shouldn't stop us from collecting these stories. And if anything, I think a lot of the initial story is that using storytelling as an outlet to deal with some of the isolation of being locked down during the pandemic, and having a voice and having something to share. And so again, I would just ask that even if you think, you know, even if your story is about a typical day, that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for these grand stories about historic events. We're really looking for stories about people and the things that all of you think are important to share.